You need to leave. Now.
Ma'am, this is my house.
She laughed. Not a polite laugh, the kind you save for something you scraped off your shoe.
Your house? Sweetie, this hasn't been your house for a long time. We voted. It's HOA property now.
My grandfather built this house.
And your grandfather is dead. So unless you've got a time machine, I suggest you get back in that little truck of yours wherever back to you came from.
Ingram stood in the driveway of his own home, his dead grandfather's lake house, the one Earl Ingram built with his bare hands in 1969, and a woman he'd never met had just told him to leave. She had no idea what she'd started. Because Leland didn't leave, he sealed every door shut, with her entire world still inside. Now, let's rewind, because you need to understand what that house meant before you can understand what stealing it cost. Leland Ingram spent 22 years in the United States Army Corps of Engineers, 2 tours in Afghanistan, structural engineer by training, the kind of man who could look at a cracked foundation and tell you exactly which load-bearing wall was failing. He came home with commendations, a bad knee, and a quiet confidence that made most people assume he was either a pastor or a retired cop. His wife Grace died of pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. Quick and cruel. Diagnosis to funeral in 11 weeks. Their daughter Naomi was 13 at the time. She stopped smiling the way kids are supposed to smile. Not sad exactly, just careful. Like the world had shown her its terms and conditions, and she'd read every line. After Grace, Leland sold the house in Atlanta. Couldn't stand the empty kitchen. Couldn't stand the hallway where her coat still hung on the 3rd hook from the left. So he made a decision. Moved to the lake house. The one place that still felt like family. Earl Ingram built that house in 1969 on 2.5 acres along the western shore of Lake Pinecrest, Tennessee. He bought the land from a white farmer named Gibbons, who sold it quietly, at night, because no realtor in the county would broker a deal to a black man. Earl poured the foundation himself, cut the beams himself, laid every single dock plank with his own hands, while his neighbors pretended he didn't exist. That house smelled like pine sap and pipe tobacco for 50 years. It was the first piece of property any Ingram ever owned, free and clear, and Earl made sure the deed was ironclad. No HOA, no covenant, no restrictions. Just land, lake, and a man's name on a piece of paper. The Pinecrest Lake Estate subdivision came 30 years later. A developer carved 84 lots out of the surrounding acreage, built cookie-cutter homes, and slapped an HOA on top. Earl's parcel was never part of it. Different deed, different plat, different century really. The HOA had as much authority over Earl's property as they had over the moon. Earl passed away 18 months before Leland arrived. And here's where the con begins. While Leland was drowning in hospice bills and funeral arrangements, while he was explaining to a 13-year-old why Mama wasn't coming home, the Pinecrest Lake Estates HOA board held a special session. 3 members present: Colleen Bradshaw, her husband Dwight Pennington, and board secretary Patricia Winslow. No other residents notified. No quorum. Their own bylaws required 5 votes for property matters. Didn't stop them. They passed Resolution 2024-15. Earl Ingram's property was declared abandoned and reclassified as HOA Common Area for administrative use. They changed the locks the next morning. By the following week, filing cabinets stood where bookshelves used to be. The kitchen had a Keurig and a laminated cleaning schedule. The living room became a reception area with a desk and a laptop displaying the HOA violation database. 18 months. That's how long they operated out of a dead man's house, charging residents $15 a month for administrative facility maintenance. 84 households, $15, 18 months. You do the math, or don't, because we'll get to that number later, and it's going to make your blood pressure spike. The smell of Earl's pipe tobacco? Gone, replaced by industrial carpet cleaner, that chemical lavender scent that doesn't smell like lavender at all. It smells like evidence being scrubbed. Leland pulled the U-Haul into the driveway on a Tuesday morning in June. Naomi woke up, rubbed her eyes, looked at the front door, and read the sign out loud. "Dad, why does it say board members only?" Leland didn't answer. He sat there, engine running, hands on the wheel, and stared at the house his grandfather built, the house that no longer recognized him. Leland did what any reasonable person would do first. He drove to the Pinecrest County Records Office the next morning, walked up to the clerk's window, and asked for the deed history on his grandfather's parcel. The clerk, a woman named Dorothy, who looked like she'd been filing documents since the invention of paper, pulled it up in 4 minutes. Clean title: Earl Ingram, recorded 1969. Transferred to Leland Ingram upon death, probated and recorded 8 months ago. No liens, no encumbrances, no mention of any HOA covenant, easement, or reclassification. Nothing. Honey, Dorothy said, peering over her glasses, whoever told you this property belongs to an HOA is either confused or lying. This parcel isn't even on the subdivision plat. Here's your first practical takeaway, and it's a big one. Every property in America has a deed recorded at the county level. If someone claims authority over your land, the first thing you do is check that deed. Not their paperwork. Yours. County records don't lie. People do. Leland drove back to the lake house with a certified copy of the deed in his hand. Colleen Bradshaw was standing in the driveway, holding a travel mug that said, "Blessed and Stressed," in gold cursive. She saw him coming and arranged her face into that particular smile, the one that looks like customer service but feels like a locked gate. "Leland, good morning. I hope you slept well in that little camper of yours. I have the deed, Mrs. Bradshaw, county certified. This property has never been part of your HOA." The smile didn't crack, it just rearranged. "Well, I appreciate you doing your homework, but the board passed a resolution, and we have a process for disputes. You're welcome to attend our next meeting and present your case." "Present my case? For my own house. We like to keep things orderly. I'm sure you understand." The smell of her perfume hit him before she'd even stepped closer. Something floral and aggressive. The kind of fragrance that doesn't introduce a woman so much as warn you she's arriving. She placed one manicured hand on his arm. Gentle, almost motherly. The way you'd touch someone you were about to disappoint on purpose. "These things take time, sweetheart." Sweetheart. He was 52 years old, 2 combat tours, a master's degree in structural engineering, and this woman just called him sweetheart on the porch of his own house. He went to the board meeting. Of course he did, because Leland Ingram still believed, at this point, that reason worked on reasonable people. The meeting was held in the lake house, his lake house. He had to sit in a folding chair in his living room while Colleen introduced him to the board as Earl's grandson, who's been living down in Atlanta. She said Atlanta, the way some people say, the other side of the tracks, technically accurate, spiritually dismissive. He presented the deed. He presented the county clerk's confirmation. He was calm, professional, clear. Colleen thanked him for his thorough presentation and called for a motion. Dwight Pennington, her husband, the vice president, the man whose spine had been surgically replaced by whatever Colleen wanted that morning, moved to table the matter for further review. Trish Winslow seconded. 3 votes. Done. 90-day review period. Brenda Suttles, the property manager, slid a form across the table. Dispute resolution request. Standard process. Allow 90 days for processing. She wouldn't make eye contact. Dwight leaned over and murmured, "These things work themselves out, son. No need to get agitated." Son. There it was again. The vocabulary of a man who saw Leland and immediately reached for the smallest word in his drawer. Leland took the form, folded it neatly, stood up, and left, without a single raised syllable. But here's what he did on the way out, and this is why you should never confuse a quiet man with a passive one. He photographed every piece of HOA furniture in his house, every filing cabinet, every printed sign, every power strip and Ethernet cable they'd installed. He recorded the entire meeting on his phone. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, meaning only one person in the conversation needs to agree to the recording, and that person was Leland. That night, he sat in the RV with his laptop and pulled up the HOA's published annual budget, public record, as required by Tennessee's Homeowners Association Act. And there it was, line item 14. Administrative facility maintenance, $15 per month per household. 84 households, $15 a month. They were charging people rent on a house they stole. Naomi handed him a gas station burrito. "So what's the plan, Dad?" He chewed, stared at the screen. The blue glow from the laptop lit his face like a man reading a map in the dark. "The plan is we eat these terrible burritos, and tomorrow we will get a lawyer." Colleen Bradshaw didn't wait long to make her next move. Within 48 hours of that board meeting, every mailbox in Pinecrest Lake Estates received a letter, on official HOA letterhead, naturally, with the subject line, "Community Update Regarding Administrative Facility." The letter was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive public relations. It never mentioned Leland by name. It didn't have to. "A property dispute has been raised regarding our administrative building. The board is handling this matter responsibly and in full compliance with our governing documents. We encourage all residents to avoid engaging with outside parties regarding this matter, and to direct any questions to the board." Translation: the black man is causing trouble. Don't talk to him. And it worked. Neighbors who'd waved at Leland the first morning suddenly found their mailboxes fascinating whenever he walked by. One woman, mid-40s, jogging outfit, golden retriever, literally crossed the street when she saw him coming. Didn't even pretend. Just pivoted like he was a pothole. But Colleen wasn't done. A woman like that never is. She had the machinery of petty bureaucracy at her fingertips, and she intended to use every lever. First, she filed a noise complaint. Leland's RV ran a small generator for power, because, let's remember, he couldn't live in his own house. The complaint cited Section 4.12 of the HOA bylaws. No temporary structures, mechanical equipment, or recreational vehicles shall produce sustained noise exceeding ambient levels. Never mind that the RV was parked on Leland's private property, which wasn't governed by the HOA. Details were for other people. Then she called county code enforcement, reported an unpermitted dwelling on the lake, one man and a minor living in a recreational vehicle without proper sanitation hookups. A county inspector showed up the next afternoon, clipboard in hand, looking exactly as thrilled as you'd expect a government employee to look on a 92-degree Tuesday. He walked around the RV, checked the portable waste tank, looked at Leland and said, "This is a campground complaint? On private land?" Apparently. The inspector shook his head, signed off on a no violation found report, and drove away. But the visit was the point. Colleen didn't need the code to stick. She needed Leland to feel watched, monitored, unwelcome. And here's the irony thick enough to choke on. The HOA's own administrative building, which was Leland's house, had never been permitted for commercial or office use. Colleen was running an unlicensed business operation out of a residential property, in violation of the county's own zoning ordinance. The woman filing complaints was the biggest violation on the lake. Leland found his lawyer that week. Gretchen Fowler, 48, sharp jaw, sharper mouth, the kind of attorney who wore reading glasses on a chain not because she needed them close, but because she liked pulling them off dramatically before delivering bad news. She specialized in HOA disputes, and she'd seen enough fraudulent boards to fill a Netflix series. Gretchen spent one afternoon with the HOA's governing documents and found the kill shot on page 11. Leland, their CC&Rs define the HOA's jurisdiction as, and I'm quoting, lots 1 through 84, as shown on the recorded subdivision plat filed with Pinecrest County. Your grandfather's parcel is not on that plat. It predates the subdivision by 3 decades. This HOA has exactly 0 authority over your property. Legally, they're trespassing. She filed a lis pendens that afternoon, a public notice in the county records that the property was subject to pending litigation. Second practical takeaway. A lis pendens is like a legal flare gun. It tells the whole world, banks, buyers, insurers, that someone's claim on a property is being challenged in court. Once it's filed, nobody can sell, transfer, or refinance that property until the court settles it. Gretchen also drafted a cease and desist letter, 14 pages, footnoted, citing 6 Tennessee statutes, and hand-delivered it to Colleen's front door. For 48 beautiful hours, it seemed to work. Brenda Suttles called Gretchen's office, voice shaking like a woman who'd just Googled the word felony for the first time. Maybe we can work something out, a timeline, a transition plan, Gretchen told Leland. He exhaled for the first time in 2 weeks. Then Colleen killed it, overruled Brenda with one sentence at an emergency board meeting. We are not negotiating with someone who doesn't even live in this community. She hired the HOA's own attorney, a man named Reed Ashworth, who charged $400 an hour and had the moral compass of a weather vane, and countersued. The claim? Adverse possession and implied dedication to community use. Adverse possession. Let that sink in. The legal argument was, essentially, we stole your house, lived in it long enough, so now it's ours. And yes, that's a real legal theory. You can Google it. People win these cases. Not often, but often enough to make your stomach turn. Leland stared at the countersuit paperwork. Naomi looked over his shoulder. Dad, can they actually do that? They can try. And trying is going to be the most expensive mistake they've ever made. The Pinecrest Lake Estate's annual community potluck was held every July on the stone pavilion overlooking the water. Checkered tablecloths, crock pots plugged into a daisy chain of extension cords. Somebody always brought deviled eggs with too much paprika, and somebody else always complained about it. It was the kind of event where people wore name tags, even though they'd lived next door to each other for 15 years. Leland went. Naomi didn't want to. Dad, these people literally stole our house. But Leland insisted. We're not hiding, baby. We live here. They walked in carrying a foil pan of Grace's cornbread recipe. Naomi held it like a shield. The first 20 minutes were almost normal. A retired postal worker named Glenn asked Leland about his military service. A young couple complimented Naomi's braids. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like a neighborhood. Then Colleen arrived. She crossed the pavilion the way a weather system crosses a valley. You could feel the pressure change before she reached you. She stopped right next to the food table, close enough that Leland could smell that perfume again. Floral napalm. Well, look who decided to grace us with their presence. Evening, Mrs. Bradshaw. You know, Leland, it takes a certain kind of nerve to show up at a community event when you're suing the community. I'm not suing the community. I'm asking for my house back. Your house, she laughed. Not a real laugh. The performed kind. The kind designed to recruit an audience. Heads turned. You've been here 5 minutes. 5. We have maintained this neighborhood for years. Where were you when the dock collapsed? Where were you when the drainage flooded the east lots? Where were you when anything needed doing? I was serving overseas, and then I was burying my wife. Silence. 3 seconds of it. Long enough for a decent person to feel shame. Colleen Bradshaw was not a decent person. See, that right there, every single time. It's always a sympathy card with you people. Always some tragedy, some excuse, some reason why the rules don't apply. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, I really am. But grief doesn't give you the right to come into a neighborhood you've never contributed to and start making demands. You people. She said it at normal volume, didn't whisper, didn't flinch. A dozen residents heard it. The retired postal worker looked at his shoes. The young couple suddenly needed to check on their car. Nobody said a word. And then came the part that broke something. Vernon Caldwell, 72 years old, Vietnam veteran, the man who'd shaken Earl Ingram's hand every Sunday morning for 30 years, pulled Leland aside near the parking lot. He smelled like Old Spice and regret. Son, listen. I liked your granddad. I did. But Colleen runs this place. She's got the board, the lawyer, half the homeowners wrapped around her finger. Nobody wins against her. Nobody. Maybe it's better if you just find somewhere else. Start fresh. Leland looked at him. You knew my grandfather. I did. Did you ever tell him to find somewhere else? Vernon's mouth opened, closed. He shook his head once, turned, and walked to his truck without another word. Naomi had heard everything. She was standing 6 feet away, holding an untouched plate of food, and her face, that careful, guarded face she'd worn since her mother died, finally cracked. Not tears, worse, disappointment, the kind that settles in a teenager's eyes when the world confirms exactly what she was afraid of. Leland put his hand on her shoulder. Let's go. They drove the RV back to their spot by the water. Naomi went inside without speaking. Leland walked down to the dock Earl built, plank by plank, and sat on the edge with his feet hanging over black water. Through the trees, he could see his lake house. Every window is glowing. Shapes moving inside, board members probably, laughing about something that had nothing to do with him. His grandfather's house, full of strangers who thought they owned it, full of strangers who thought they owned him. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a photo. Grace, standing on this same dock, pregnant with Naomi, summer of 2009, sunlight in her hair. That smile, the one that made everything feel temporary, even the bad stuff. His thumb hovered over Gretchen's number. One call. Drop the case. 2 words, and the fight was over. He could sell the land, take the money, find another lake, another house, another life where nobody looked at him like he was trespassing in his own story. The crickets were deafening. The lake smelled like mud and gasoline from somebody's boat. Then, from inside the RV, quiet, half asleep. "Dad, are you coming in?" He put the phone away, stood up, cracked his neck. Not tonight. Not ever. Tomorrow, he was calling Carlton Reeves. And Carlton Reeves didn't find dirt. He excavated graves. Carlton Reeves had been Leland's battle buddy in Kandahar, the kind of friend who'd share his last MRE and then complain about it for 6 months. After the Army, Carlton got his PI license and built a reputation in Nashville for being the guy you called when you needed to know where the money went. Not the big money, the sneaky money, the kind that slides between line items like a snake between floorboards. Leland gave him everything. Budgets, resolution minutes, insurance paperwork Gretchen had subpoenaed. Carlton disappeared for 9 days. When he came back, he was carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man who'd found something rotten and enjoyed every second of digging it up. "Brother," Carlton said, dropping the folder on the RV's fold-out table, "you don't have a neighbor problem. You have a criminal enterprise." 3 bombshells, in order. First, the money. The HOA had been collecting $15 per month from 84 households for administrative facility maintenance. 18 months. Total, $22,680. Every dime funneled into a special projects account, controlled exclusively by Colleen and Dwight. No board oversight, no audit, no receipts. Just 2 names on a signature card and a balance that kept growing. Second, the insurance. Colleen filed a claim for $12,000 in storm damage repairs on the HOA administrative building, using Leland's property address. She collected the payout. The insurer had no idea the building wasn't HOA owned. That's not creative accounting. That's insurance fraud, the kind that comes with a case number and a defendant's table. Third, the vote itself. Carlton obtained the full minutes from Resolution 2024-15. 3 members present: Colleen, Dwight, and Trish Winslow. The HOA's own bylaws required a quorum of 5 for any property reclassification vote. 3 isn't a quorum. It's a conspiracy over coffee. The resolution was never legally valid, not for a single day of those 18 months. And the meeting had been called as a special emergency session with 24 hours notice, the minimum for genuine emergencies like burst pipes. Not for seizing a dead man's house while his grandson planned a funeral. Gretchen read the report twice, took off her reading glasses, dramatically, chain swinging, and said 6 words that rearranged the entire chessboard. "This isn't a property dispute anymore." She leaned forward. "They didn't just take your house. They monetized it. They insured it. They ran it like an illegal business on property they had no right to touch. We're talking conversion, fraud, potentially RICO-adjacent conduct." Practical takeaway number 3. Conversion is the legal term for when someone takes your property and uses it as their own. And when they profit from it, the damages multiply. If you discover someone making money off something they took from you, don't just get mad. Get an accountant. Then get a lawyer. In that order. Leland leaned back. For the first time since he'd pulled that U-Haul into the driveway, the knot behind his sternum loosened. Not from relief, but from something sharper. Clarity. He looked at Carlton. "How much is on paper?" "All of it. Every dollar. Every signature. every lie. Leland smiled, not the warm kind, the kind that starts in the jaw and never reaches the eyes. Good, then we don't settle, we finish. Over the next 10 days, Leland Ingram stopped being a man trying to get his house back and became a man building a machine. Every piece had a purpose, every move had a sequence, and every single one of them was legal. Gretchen Fowler filed 3 actions simultaneously, a legal triple tap designed to hit the HOA from directions they didn't know existed. The first was a quiet title action. In plain English, it's a lawsuit that asks a judge to look at a property, look at every claim against it, and officially declare who owns it, permanently. Every fraudulent resolution, every board vote, every piece of paper Colleen had scribbled her name on would be examined under oath and either validated or erased. Gretchen wasn't worried about which one. "I've filed 60 of these," she told Leland. "I lose when the other side has real documents." They don't. The second was an emergency ex parte motion for property restoration. This one was the sharp end of the spear. An ex parte motion means you're asking the judge to act immediately, without the other side even being present, because the evidence of ongoing harm is so clear that waiting for a full trial would cause irreparable damage. Gretchen attached Carlton's financial audit, the fraudulent insurance claim, and the illegitimate board minutes. 300 pages of receipts. She wanted the judge to order the HOA to vacate Leland's property before they could shred a single document. The third was a criminal referral to the district attorney's office. Conversion, insurance fraud, and misappropriation of HOA funds. Gretchen hand-delivered it herself. She said the assistant DA's eyebrows nearly left his forehead. That was the legal architecture. But Leland was an engineer, and engineers don't just draw plans, they build. While Gretchen worked the courts, Leland made his move on the house itself. He still held the deed. The lis pendens was filed, and under Tennessee property law, a deeded owner retains the right to access, maintain, and secure their property, even during an active dispute. Colleen had changed his locks. He was about to return the favor. He started on a Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., while the HOA board was still sleeping. He brought a cordless drill, a toolbox, and 4 commercial-grade Bluetooth deadbolt systems, the kind used in boutique hotels, brushed nickel finish, silent electromagnetic engagement, each one controlled by a single app on his phone, linked to a master kill switch, 1 button, 4 doors, simultaneous lockout. The beauty of it was the subtlety. The new locks looked nearly identical to the ones Colleen's people had installed. Same color, same profile, same keyhole, except the keyhole was decorative now. The real mechanism was digital, encrypted, and answered to exactly 1 phone number. He installed 4,000 pixel security cameras at every entrance, tiny units tucked under the eaves like barn swallows, hardwired to a cloud server with battery backup so cutting power wouldn't kill the feed. Every frame time-stamped, every angle covered. If someone sneezed on the porch, Leland would have it in high definition before the tissue hit the ground. Total cost? $2,100. The best investment he'd ever made. Now he needed witnesses. Not just any witnesses, the right ones. Vernon Caldwell showed up at the RV on a Thursday evening, hat in hand, literally. His granddaughter, a pre-law junior at Vanderbilt named Elise, had shown him Carlton's financial report. Vernon read it twice, went quiet for a long time, and then drove straight to Leland's campsite. Earl Ingram was the best man on this lake. I should have said that when it mattered. I'm saying it now. What do you need? What Leland needed was a coalition. Vernon delivered. Over the next week, the old veteran knocked on doors, quietly, carefully, never mentioning the lawsuit directly. He just asked one question. Have you seen the HOA's financial audit? Nobody had, because there wasn't one. 23 households, out of 84, signed a formal petition demanding a full accounting of the Special Projects Fund. The cracks in Colleen's empire weren't just showing, they were spreading. The final piece was Stuart Dunlap, a 35-year-old reporter from Channel 4 in Knoxville, who'd built his career on HOA abuse stories. Leland called him, laid out the timeline: fraud, racism, stolen property, and offered him exclusive access to everything. Dunlap's voice on the phone sounded like a dog who just spotted a steak. When? The Lake Gala. 10 days. I'll have a crew there. The gala. Colleen's crown jewel. Every year, she hosted it at the administrative building, Leland's house, with a live band on the dock, catered barbecue in the kitchen Earl built, and $50 tickets sold to every resident. This year, she'd already collected $4,000 in ticket sales for a party in a stolen house. Gretchen called that evening. "Are you sure about this? We could just serve the order quietly." Leland looked out the RV window. The lake was flat and black, reflecting a sky full of stars his grandfather used to name for him. "She threw a party in my grandfather's house. I'm going to end it in my grandfather's house." Colleen Bradshaw could feel the ground shifting. She didn't know exactly what Leland was planning, but she could smell it the way animals smell a storm. And cornered animals don't retreat, they bite. Her first move was financial. She had Brenda Suttles file a retroactive lien against Leland's property. $14,400 for 18 months of unpaid HOA assessments. The logic was circular enough to make your head spin. They stole his house, charged people to use it, and now they were billing him for the privilege of being robbed. The lien was garbage. His property wasn't in the HOA, but a filing creates a cloud on title. It shows up in records. It scares banks. And slowing things down was exactly what Colleen needed. Her second move was dirtier. She called the Pinecrest County Sheriff's Office, not to report a crime, but to manufacture one. She told the dispatcher she was concerned about the welfare of a minor child living in unsafe conditions. Her voice trembled just enough to sound like a worried neighbor. She'd practiced that tremble. It was one of her best tools. Sheriff Dale Holcomb showed up the next afternoon, walked around the RV like he was inspecting a crime scene, looked at the water tank, looked at Naomi doing calculus homework at the fold-out table, looked back at Leland. Somebody filed a concern about living conditions. "Living conditions are fine, Sheriff. She's got water, food, AC, and a 4.0 GPA. Holcomb sighed. "Well, the report's filed. Gotta follow through. Maybe you ought to think about finding somewhere more permanent." He said permanent the way a man says reasonable when he means easier for me. Then he drove away without looking back. That was the second time authorities sided with Colleen without blinking. The code inspector had at least been embarrassed. Holcomb wasn't even that. Just a man punching a clock while a woman weaponized his badge. But Colleen wasn't finished. The third move was the cruelest, designed to destroy reputation, not property. At the next HOA meeting, held in Leland's stolen living room, Colleen stood before 40 residents and expressed deep concern about community safety. She held up a printed background check. "I ran a standard check, which any responsible board president would do, and I found deeply troubling information about the individual camping on our lakefront." The printout showed a criminal record, aggravated assault, drug possession, failure to appear. It belonged to a different Leland Ingram, a 41-year-old from Memphis with a different middle name, different social, different everything. Colleen knew. She'd seen the discrepancies. She didn't care. She needed residents to see assault next to a name they recognized, and to feel afraid. "I'm not saying anything definitive," she said, hands raised, palms out, the universal gesture of a woman saying something definitive. "I just think we deserve to know who's living among us." The murmur was instantaneous. The retirement couple in front exchanged glances. A woman pulled out her phone, probably Googling. The poison was in the water, and Colleen knew it didn't need to be true. It just needed to circulate. 2 nights later, Leland walked to the dock at 10 p.m., his dock, on his land, and 2 squad cars rolled up, lights flashing. Dispatch had received a call about a suspicious male lingering near residential property after dark. He stood in the blue and red strobe light, hands visible, voice steady, while 2 officers ran his actual record, clean, and left with a shrug. "Sorry for the inconvenience." Naomi watched from the RV window. When he came inside, she didn't speak. The look on her face said everything. "How many times, Dad? How many times do we have to prove we belong here?" Meanwhile, in places Colleen couldn't see, The machine was grinding forward. Gretchen's recusal motion had worked. The original judge, Russell Pennington, Dwight's cousin because of course he was, had been removed. The case landed on Judge Elaine Prescott's desk. She reviewed the emergency filing, Carlton's financial audit, the fraudulent insurance claim, and the invalid board minutes. She scheduled an expedited hearing for Thursday. The gala was Saturday. 3 days. Colleen was shopping for centerpieces and tasting barbecue samples. Leland was reviewing a court order with his attorney. The difference between winning and losing is almost never about who's louder. It's about who's still working when the other side thinks the fight is over. Thursday morning. Judge Elaine Prescott read every page of Gretchen's filing. The fraudulent resolution, the forged insurance claim, the financial audit showing $22,000 siphoned into an unsupervised account. Black coffee, a face carved from limestone. At 11:14 a.m., she signed the emergency order. The HOA was to vacate Leland's property within 48 hours. No board member could enter the premises, remove documents, or alter the property. Violation meant contempt charges and arrest. Gretchen called. "We got it." "Sealed?" "Sealed. Nobody sees it until you say so." Saturday night, at the gala. Gretchen paused. "You could serve this tomorrow." She'd be out by Friday. Clean. Quiet. Clean and quiet is what she's counting on. He wasn't wrong. Colleen had spent 18 months stealing in silence, behind closed doors, unsigned emails, whispered conversations. She built her empire on the assumption nobody would ever make noise. Leland intended to make noise, the kind that echoed. Friday afternoon, 1 day before the gala. Colleen was at the lake house directing a florist arranging white hydrangeas on the porch railing. A catering truck backed into the driveway. String lights along the dock. A rented sound system in boxes by the kitchen door. $8,000 of HOA funds. Every dollar another brick in the monument she was building to herself. Leland walked up the driveway, alone. No lawyer, no visible witnesses. The cameras under the eaves were already rolling. "Colleen." She turned. The smile flickered when she saw his face. Not angry, not pleading, settled. "The court has ruled. You need to vacate. I'm asking one last time. Handle this with dignity." She stared. The florist stopped arranging, and then Colleen did what she always did when procedure failed, when lawyers failed, when policy failed. She reached for the weapon she'd never had to pretend she didn't carry. "Dignity? You want to lecture me about dignity?" Her voice climbed. "Do you have any idea what this community was before people like you started creeping in?" "Colleen, no. You don't get to Colleen me. Your grandfather had no business buying this land. Everyone knew it. Everyone. Old Gibbons was half senile. That's the only reason that deal happened. And now you show up with your little folder and your sob story about your dead wife, and you think some judge is going to hand this place to you?" The florist's mouth fell open. A neighbor, Glenn, the retired postal worker, had stopped walking his dog along the road. He was holding his phone, recording. Colleen didn't see any of it. She was past seeing. "This is our lake, our neighborhood. We built this. We maintained this. And I will be damned if I let some—" Half a second. The words sat on her tongue like a coal. She swallowed it. What came out was barely better. "If I let someone like you, from God knows where, waltz in and take what we built." Your people don't build. You take. That's all you've ever done. And no legal tricks from your kind are going to change what everyone here already knows. Silence. Absolute. The lake itself seemed to stop. Leland looked at her, didn't blink. Hands at his sides, still, open, empty. The posture of a man who learned long ago that his stillness was his loudest weapon. "You done?" Colleen was panting. The florist was crying. Glenn's phone was still raised. Leland turned and walked down the driveway, gravel crunching under boots that didn't hurry, didn't slow. What Colleen didn't know, couldn't have known, because rage had eaten every rational circuit in her brain, was that 4 cameras had captured every syllable in 4,000 pixel clarity, cloud-backed, time-stamped, already uploaded to a server she would never reach and could never delete. That night, Naomi listened to the audio. Her hands shook. Dad, that's what Grandpa Earl heard. That's exactly what he heard. Leland put his arm around her. I know, baby, but Grandpa Earl didn't have cameras, and he didn't have a court order. He looked out the RV window. Across the water, the lake house glowed with string lights. Colleen's crew was still setting up for tomorrow, the band doing a sound check on the dock, a lazy cover of Sweet Home Alabama drifting across the surface like a bad joke nobody laughed at. Tomorrow night, the gala, 80 residents, $50 tickets, a live band on a stolen dock, catered barbecue in a stolen kitchen. The biggest night of Colleen Bradshaw's year, hosted inside the house of the man she just told to his face that his kind don't belong. She was shopping for wine glasses. He was charging his phone to full battery. 1 button, 4 doors, and a sheriff who already had his copy of the court order folded in his breast pocket. Saturday night, 7 p.m. The lake house blazed like a lantern. Tiki torches lined the shoreline in perfect rows. The catering crew had set up a hickory smoker on the south side of the yard. The smell drifted across the water like a promise nobody was going to keep. Inside, 83 residents filled every room Earl Ingram had ever built. They held wine glasses and cocktail napkins. They complimented the hydrangeas. They told Colleen the venue was just gorgeous, and she absorbed every word like sunlight. The band was on the dock. Bass guitar thumping through the planks Earl nailed down 50 years ago. A singer in a sequined top doing Motown covers, which, if you think about it, was its own kind of irony nobody in that crowd was equipped to appreciate. Colleen wore a white linen blazer and pearls. She moved through the party like a mayor on election night, touching elbows, laughing with her head tilted back, accepting compliments on her beautiful building. Dwight trailed behind her holding a drink he hadn't sipped, nodding at everything like a dashboard bobblehead. 8:15 p.m. A black pickup truck pulled up to the curb, then a silver sedan behind it, then a white news van with Channel 4, Knoxville, on the side, and a satellite dish folding upward like a periscope. Leland stepped out of the truck. Clean navy suit, white shirt, no tie. Earl never wore ties. Naomi beside him in a sundress Grace had bought her 2 sizes too big the summer before she died. It fit now. Gretchen Fowler stepped out of the sedan, briefcase in hand. Vernon Caldwell climbed out of the passenger side, pressed khakis, veteran's pin on his lapel. Stuart Dunlap and his cameraman were already rolling. Leland walked up the porch steps. The crowd on the lawn noticed first. Conversations dying in clusters, like candles blown out one by one. People on the dock craned their necks. The band kept playing for another 8 bars before the bass player saw the news camera and stopped mid-riff. Leland stood on the porch, his porch. He pulled out his phone, opened the smart lock app. 4 icons, 4 doors, 1 master switch. He pressed it. 4 locks engaged simultaneously. Front door, back door, side utility entrance, dock access door. 4 deep mechanical clunks, so loud they cut through the music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, and the humid Tennessee air like a judge's gavel hitting wood. Every head turned. Colleen's smile vanished. What was that? Leland didn't shout, didn't need to. The silence was doing all the work. He stepped to the porch railing and spoke in the same calm, measured voice he'd used every single day since he arrived. The voice Colleen had mistaken for weakness. Good evening. My name is Leland Ingram. I am the owner of this house. My grandfather, Earl Ingram, built it with his bare hands in 1969. For the past 18 months, this board has illegally occupied my property, collected revenue from it, filed fraudulent insurance claims on it, and lied to every single one of you about it. He held up the court order. The paper caught the tiki torch light. Headlights swept the driveway. Sheriff Dale Holcomb's cruiser, the same man who'd told Leland to find somewhere more permanent, pulled in slow and parked. Holcomb stepped out in full uniform. This time, he wasn't carrying a wellness check clipboard. He was carrying a court order. He walked directly to Colleen. Ma'am, I'm serving an emergency order from Judge Elaine Prescott. The Pinecrest Lake Estates HOA is to vacate this property immediately. All personal property belonging to the association must be removed within 72 hours. Colleen's composure shattered like a glass dropped on tile. "This is harassment. He's disrupting a community event. I want him arrested." Holcomb didn't flinch. "Ma'am, it's his house." 4 words. The quietest demolition in the history of Pinecrest Lake. Leland tapped his phone. The locks disengaged. The doors clicked open. 83 residents filed out in stunned silence, some embarrassed, some furious, all of them recalculating every dollar they'd ever paid to this board. Colleen stormed toward the driveway. Stuart Dunlap stepped into her path, microphone extended, camera light burning white. "Mrs. Bradshaw, Stuart Dunlap, Channel 4. Can you comment on allegations of financial fraud, insurance fraud, and racial discrimination against homeowner Leland Ingram?" She shoved the camera. Dwight grabbed her elbow and pulled her toward the Lexus. Trish Winslow, board secretary, loyal soldier, 6 years of silence, stood on the lawn, mascara streaking, and turned to Leland. "I'm sorry. I should have said something a long time ago." Vernon Caldwell stepped onto the porch beside Leland, straightened his back, and saluted. The 23 residents who'd signed Vernon's petition began to clap. Then the couple next to them. Then the family behind. The applause spread across the yard like a wave. Not thunderous, not cinematic, just real. The sound of a neighborhood waking up. Leland walked inside, alone. He stood in the living room, empty now, filing cabinets and folding chairs where his grandfather's life used to be. He touched the wall where the oak bookshelves had hung for 50 years, whispered, "I got it back, Grandpa." The fallout was swift, thorough, and, for anyone who'd ever been bulldozed by a petty tyrant in a blazer, deeply satisfying. Colleen Bradshaw and Dwight Pennington were charged with criminal conversion, insurance fraud, filing false police reports, and misappropriation of HOA funds. Colleen's real estate license, the one she'd kept active for 20 years, just in case, was revoked by the Tennessee Real Estate Commission before the ink on the indictment was dry. Dwight, who'd spent 6 years signing whatever his wife put in front of him, suddenly discovered that "I didn't read it" is not a legal defense. It turns out the law expects you to read things before you sign them. Shocking concept. Brenda Suttles, the property manager, cooperated with prosecutors within 48 hours of being contacted. She provided receipts, emails, and internal memos documenting $41,000 in misappropriated HOA funds, including $8,000 spent on the very gala where the whole operation collapsed. Her cooperation earned her a reduced charge. Her dignity, however, was not part of the plea deal. The fraudulent lien against Leland's property was dissolved by Judge Prescott in a 4-sentence ruling that essentially said, "This lien has no legal basis, no factual basis, and no business existing." The quiet title action succeeded unanimously. Earl Ingram's deed, recorded in 1969, challenged by nobody for 55 years until a woman in pearls decided she wanted a free office, was declared permanent and incontestable. The Pinecrest Lake Estates HOA was placed under court-appointed receivership. New elections were held that September. Vernon Caldwell, 72 years old, bad hip, excellent coleslaw, was elected interim president by a margin so wide they didn't bother counting twice. His first act was commissioning an independent financial audit. His second was abolishing the Special Projects Fund. His third was personally delivering a written apology to Leland Ingram's mailbox, the mailbox that now stood at the end of a driveway that belonged, without question, to the man whose name was on the deed. Stuart Dunlap's story aired on Channel 4 the following Tuesday. It ran for 11 minutes, an eternity in local news. The segment included the security camera footage of Colleen's tirade, the gala confrontation, and an interview with Leland sitting on the dock Earl built, speaking in that same quiet voice that had carried him through every indignity without once cracking. The story was picked up by 3 national outlets within a week. Colleen Bradshaw's face, mid-shove, hand-on-camera lens, became the thumbnail on every share. Leland spent the rest of the summer restoring the lake house. He tore out the commercial carpet himself. Underneath, Earl's original pine floors were scratched but intact. 55 years of boot prints and bare feet, still holding. He rebuilt the oak bookshelves from reclaimed wood he found at a salvage yard in Chattanooga. Naomi helped sand the dock planks on weekends, earbuds in, humming something Leland didn't recognize but didn't interrupt. He hung Grace's photograph on the wall facing the lake, east side, where the morning light hit it first. Some mornings, he'd sit with his coffee and watch the sun cross her face, and for a few minutes, the house felt the way it was supposed to feel. Full. Even with just 2 people in it. In October, Leland established the Earl Ingram Lake Access Scholarship, an annual fund providing lakefront recreation access to underserved families across Tennessee. The first recipient was a 14-year-old boy from Memphis who'd never seen a lake. He caught a 3-pound bass on his first cast and screamed so loud Vernon Caldwell heard it from 3 docks over. The following spring, Leland hosted the first Earl Ingram Community Fish Fry, open to every resident, no charge, no tickets, no board approval required. Vernon brought his coleslaw. Glenn, the postal worker, brought cornbread. Even a few of Colleen's former supporters showed up, sheepish but hungry. Leland handed them plates without a word, because that's what Earl would have done. The narrator, that's me, will leave you with this. Earl Ingram built a house on a lake that didn't want him. His grandson kept it. And now that house belongs to everyone who was ever told they didn't deserve a seat at the water's edge. If you've ever had an HOA try to steal your peace, your property, or your dignity, drop your story in the comments. The wilder, the better. We read every single one. And subscribe. Hit that bell, because next week, we've got a story about a woman whose HOA fined her $500 a day over a garden gnome. What she did next? Absolute perfection. You don't want to miss it.
Listen, I need you to sit with this one for a second. Colleen Bradshaw had every advantage. She had the board. She had the lawyer. She had the sheriff on speed dial and the neighborhood too afraid to push back. She had 18 months of momentum and the kind of confidence that only comes from never being told no. And Leland Ingram has a deed, a thoughtful evidence, and the patience of a man who had buried his wife, served his country, and still had the composure to say, right then, when a woman told him to his face that his kind didn't belong. That's the part that gets me. He never raised his voice, not once. He let her scream, he had lied, he let her throw a $4,000 party in his stolen house. And then he pressed one button and ended everything she'd built for a foundation she never owned. The lesson here isn't complicated. Document everything. Know your deed, know your rights, and never mistake a quiet man for a defeated one. Colleen plays stupid games. She won the grand prize. If this story hits you the way it hit me, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come on now. Next week's story involves a garden gnome, a $500 day fine, and a woman who turned her front yard into the HOA's worst nightmare. You're going to love it.